Hello. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm sure both the portrait and beer opportunities will continue, so we might as well get started. My name is Malta. I have the pleasure of running design here at Stripe, and I have the honor of welcoming all of you in our space, or part of our space. And it's I also have the pleasure of having our space used for tonight's particular topic. I'll go to a design conference about pretty much anything, but this particular topic seems more worthwhile than most. Giving everyone an opportunity to literally just be themselves and still have the same opportunities and chances to succeed and do well as the person next to them seems like not too much to ask, if you ask me. So with that, welcome to the real MVPs who are putting on the show, and welcome to Stripe.
All right. All right, guys, so welcome to the first installment of Vectors. It's kind of crazy to say that. 3 or 4 months ago, that was just an idea. And now we have a room full of people backed by some of the best design companies in the world. So just give a round of applause for everything for making it possible. So over the next couple of hours, you're going to see some folks come up and talk and get on stage and talk. And because of that dynamic, you might think that these people are more important than you for some reason, because they're in stage and you're not. But this conference is exactly about that idea and challenging that idea. And the truth is that we all have perspectives that are valuable. So we really hope that by the end of this event, you feel empowered and confident to share your perspective with others and really use it as your superpower. That's really the reason why we put this together. So we're excited to share it with you guys.
Hi, couple of words just in terms of context. My name is Julio. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Chair at the local chapter of AIGA San Francisco. One of the things that was really important for the team from the very beginning is really in ensuring that students were a part of this event somehow. So we did that in a couple of different ways. It was important for us to have a fair amount of the admission be free for students. But also I teach at San Jose State, and I basically enlisted a bunch of my students to just help out. One student in particular who I'm trying to find, but I can't find. I want to just give a shout out to Lillian Salazar, who developed the branding for the conference in the end. But that was really important to kind of make sure that the next generation of designers has a seat like where you are, so that at some point in a few years you see yourselves in these people, and then shoot for that. Shoot for like, hey, I have a different voice, I have a new point of view. I want to bring that to the table, and that you see that as a student. So that was really important for both the AIGA and San Jose State. So it's really been an honor to work with these guys and putting this together, and we really hope you enjoy the show.
Great. And the question we're here to answer today is, how does identity shape design? And that's something I want you to all hold with you as you take in these talks today, as you experience the small business booths that we have out front, techies, the questions that we're asking. How does who you are impact your work? And the wonderful speaker lineup we have today is here to tell us their stories. So we ask that you welcome them warmly, and let's get started. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, crap. Okay. Oh. Damn. Yeah, you kind of forget somehow that you got this on. Hey, hi. Oh, I need to, sorry. Hola. No, come on. Okay, hola. Oh, man, I love this. You cannot see this, but I have 2 monitors here, and they're called confidence monitors, and they pretty much are my notes, so I'm just going to be reading this. I wish live had this, just like go around just like with a script. So, hi. I need to get, okay. Okay, yeah, sorry, I just needed to know what the hell is going on here. Okay, so one of the organizers is a friend with the people that were here, and they told me about this conference that they just here, and as soon as they were just like, we're organizing it, it's just like, I want to talk. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but just give me a spot. And they were kind enough to do that. And I just invited myself. And then a month later, obviously, he asked me, so what are you going to talk about? I was like, oh, yeah, so creative confidence, I guess. And then I found out that the CEO, the founder of IDEO actually has a talk called Creative Confidence. So I was like, I wasn't feeling as confident of my creative confidence thing. So I decided to change it, and I did a 180 turn, and I changed it to fear in design. So totally opposite, right? And I have to warn you that there might be some difficult moments in this presentation. I'm going to be talking about some very personal stuff because I'm here to get naked. Not that kind of naked, though. Can you hear me? Yeah. Not that kind of naked. Don't get too excited. It's going to be more of the emotional kind of naked, the boring kind. And so, hola, soy Pablo Stanley. Soy un diseñador. That means I'm a designer. It sounds more exotic than what it actually means. Just out of curiosity, raise your hands, all the Latinos here. Latinos, Hispanic. Okay, cool. Yeah, all my homeboys and my homegirls. That's cool. So I am from Mexico. Yeah. Woo. Okay. So being from Mexico, well, you always see the United States as your neighbor. You know, we have always seen them as our neighbor. And our neighbor with the big house, with the perfect lawn, the expensive car, the nuclear weapons, and coming soon, the giant, shiny new wall, you know? So I'm not just Mexican, I also grew up in the border. And growing up on the border, well, I was just right next to my neighbor. And being next to your neighbor, you daily get reminded of how cool your neighbor is, and that, that you are not as good as them, and that you're not welcome. Oh, crap, sorry. And that you might be a bad hombre. And being that close to your rich, powerful friend, you cannot help but to feel inferior. And the thing is that they are always better at everything, you know? But there's something that we feel a little bit better at. And that's football. So, yeah, and you probably mistakenly call it soccer, but but no, it's football. And football is our thing, you know? It's the thing that we're proud of, the thing that we're good at. And that thing we're good. So there has always been a rivalry, or at least we think there is. And the rivalry between the United States and Mexico and the football. And we always remain better at that. So we're really proud of that. But then something changed, I don't know, in the 90s. I suppose like an executive realized that there's money in football, and then they started investing in it. So this rivalry culminated in one game. This was in 2002, the FIFA World Cup in Seoul, Seoul, Korea. In Spanish is Seoul. Seoul, Korea. And I remember I was at a friend's house, and I'm pretty sure like everyone in Mexico was at a friend's house glued to the TV. The whole nation was glued to the TV. And the thing is, I don't even like football, to be honest. But that's something that just brings us all together. And I'm sure that you probably don't care, but we did care. We cared a lot. And the thing is that this game was, well, it's like whoever lost that game was going to be kicked out of there and was going to be eliminated. So the game starts, and 1 minute, 2 minutes, everything's going well. It's just a football game, I guess. And then on the 8th minute, the United States scores a goal. And obviously, my heart sunk. If you have seen a football game, you know that they're long as hell. So getting scored on the 8th minute is not a good sign. But at the same time, it's a long game, right? We can do this. We got this. Still a long time. And then realize that something happened to the team. You could see they were yelling at each other. They were being disorganized. They felt lost. They looked defeated already. And then on the second half, well, they scored again. And 2-0, 2-0. And the whole country, well, just shed a tear. We had been beaten at our own thing. The thing that we thought we were better at, the thing that we're proud of, you know? And obviously your spirits got broken. And the thing is that the US didn't score that goal. You could see it in the team. It was our fear, our self-doubt that scored that goal. It was that feeling of being smaller. And suddenly that inferiority complex, like, it was cemented, you know? It stopped being a complex. And suddenly we were just inferior. Except at food. We're still very good at food, and I think that's our thing now. Seriously, we're really good at it. You guys cannot make a good taco or a good burrito. And if you want proof of that, just go to any Italian, Chinese, Mexican restaurant and just take a look at the kitchen and see who's making your burger. So yeah, that's something that I carry with me. The inferior switch in my UI is turned on by default. And we all carry something like that. And we try so hard to bury those things, right? That fear and uncertainty, because it's hard, right? And the thing is that fear, it plays a great role in the life of the designer. Exposing yourself and being vulnerable is kind of in the core of every creative. And it's the cool thing too, I think it's one of the coolest things too in the designer, where we actually get to use our left and right brain. It's kind of a requirement, right? That you have to use your analytical and your emotional side. And the thing is, well, that it's hard. The right brain is kind of hard. It deals with the subjective, right? When you actually want your work to look objective, it pushes for the emotional when you want your work to look rational. And it's hard to defend. It's really hard to defend the right brain because it's just like soft and airy and it's like personal. And I see it like there's a parallel with the artist. Well, the artist has to deal with this every day, and that's their thing, right? And I don't know if you've noticed this, but we as designers kind of want to distance ourselves from the artist. Have you noticed that? That we don't want people to confuse what we do with what the artist does. You just, no, I'm not an artist, I'm a designer. And why? Because the artist deals with the emotional and the personal. And we view their work as a reflection of their souls. And it's not just about the painting of the piece, it's the story behind it, it's the struggle of the artist, right? Their suffering. So we kind of avoid that. Because, well, it requires us to be more open, to embrace those emotions, to be vulnerable. And so what do? We just, we close down. We suppress our intuition. We give in to the left side. And we follow the facts, not our hunches. And we use the analytical as armors. And the thing is that we use them as an armor because it's easy to defend yourself with them. And it's easier to use them because, well, like numbers don't lie, right? We have them. It's just like it feels more real, right? And it's hard to defend intuition. It's difficult to convince people of the feeling you have, to embrace the warm and fuzzy things inside you. And it's scary to open up, and it just like, it feels dangerous. And we have two types of fear. We creatives deal with those. And that's the fear about ourselves and the fear about what others think of us. And the thing is that the fear about ourselves can make us create our best work while the fear about what others might think of us makes us create not our own work. For me, being Latino was, for the longest time, something that I would try to hide. Something that I didn't want to be put in that box. I didn't want people to judge me because of that. And my inferiority complex was just bringing me down, right? Obviously, it's kind of hard. I'm obviously Mexican and my accent is all over the place. And probably for you, it's something different. You know, it can be your gender, your nationality, your socioeconomic background, the school you went to, a disability, the color of your skin. But those things that make you different, as cliche as it sounds, those are not your weaknesses. They are your superpowers. They give you a different perspective from others. Your culture, your struggles, that inner fight, they make you one of a kind. They give you a niche. They make you special. And in parallel with all these fears and all these things, we also carry the designer's self-doubt. And because we deal with vulnerability every day. And we start asking ourselves, we doubt our work, and we kind of say, like, am I a real designer? Am I just pretending? We start undervaluing our work because we worry too much about what others think. And this could be probably driven by this illusion of that whatever we create has to be magnificent and extraordinary. But we don't see this kind of irrational thinking in other things that we do. Like, imagine if you were like riding a bike and then suddenly you were starting to question yourself, like, am I a real bike rider? Am I just pretending? Will people realize that I'm faking it? You don't do that, right? You are a bike rider. You're doing the work. You're riding a freaking bike. You might not be the fastest bike rider. You might not be the best bike rider, but you are riding the bike. You're doing the work. I mean, I invite you to try pretending that you are a musician while you're playing the guitar. I invite you to try pretending to be a writer while you're writing a story. When you open Photoshop or Sketch or Figma or Adobe XD and you start drawing a box and you add a text layer and you put a color and you make a decision, you are a designer. There's no way to pretend it, okay? You are a designer when you are designing. You're doing the work. Now, are you a good designer? How do you become a good designer, right? By not quitting, by not giving up. You become good by opening up and continue creating. You make good work by making lots of not very good work, by removing the fears of what others might think, by not surrendering them to them. And I invite you on a ride. We don't know exactly where we're going. This ride is called uncertainty. And on this ride, I invite you to give fear a seat. We let fear and self-doubt be part of your ride, sitting next to us or in the back. And we don't suppress them or push them out of the car. We just give them a seat. We acknowledge them. For me, my passengers are next to me, just my Mexican insecurity, just like screaming at me all the time. And my designer self-doubt is just like pulling me to sitting in the back and see from the rear view mirror. But you and I, we're in the driver's seat. We don't let them take the wheel, and oh my God, they want to take the wheel. But you know what they'll do, right? They'll just probably stop the car, go back to the home, probably even crash the car. But we don't give them control. They might take the radio, and that's okay. They might put some sad songs, that's Joy Division. Sometimes they put like cumbia, Selena, Juan Gabriel, start crying with Juan Gabriel. You let them do that because you're in this ride together. You invite them. And when you do that, you open up to the possibility of growing by not letting them control you. You're being okay with being uncomfortable, and you're being okay with that uncertainty, with that ride. Okay, gotta grab this up, and usually tell me that you gotta have an action plan at the end, some steps. How can I do this? So I have some really quick actions, some things to do. The first one is a little bit of what I did. You don't have to exactly do, except you don't have to come tomorrow at work. It's like, oh my God, I need to cry of all this. But you do get naked, you do it a little bit, you start putting your guard down, you open yourself up, you stop pretending, and you start knowing that it's okay not to know everything. That it's okay not to know the difference between a product designer and a UX designer and an interaction designer and a design disruptor. I don't know. No, we're all making it up, right? And we hear, oh, fake it till make it. And faking it, yes, that it will open some doors, it will give you some opportunities, but you got to stop faking it at some time, right? It's not only until you start opening yourself up when you give yourself the chance to learn and to grow. Next one is bring others to the party. Get naked together. And if you did the first one, this one sometimes will just come naturally, organically, because others might empathize with what you're going through or what you're thinking. Or probably it's a mentor, that is just sees you and probably wants to help. And you'll also soon realize that these people that have a lot of experience and they're masters in the field, you realize that they have fears too, and they have fear in the right too. And the last but not least, just be kind to yourself, and during this process, it's really hard, it's really easy to beat yourself up. It's a little bit hard for me to be kind of to myself, but you got to do it, and you have to learn to come to peace with yourself. And someone that is really important to me told me, you got to treat yourself how you would treat a friend. Treat yourself. That's it. Gracias. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm going to steal this little handheld thingy from Pablo.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, how's everyone doing? What's up? Cool. So my name's Robin Canner. I've lived in a lot of different places, but I'm from Fairfield, Maine, USA. It's a cool small little town. If you're queer and cool with it, you want to raise your hand for a second? Yeah, that rules. What's up? This talk's for you. Everybody else, hi. So I want to tell you a story about a girl that I knew who grew up on the internet. The internet was her favorite space in the entire world. It's like where she learned how to carve out her space as a human being. And it's not like she wasn't able to do that in real life, just like it was always removed a little bit. So she found herself on the internet a ton. She actually learned the majority of her womanhood on the internet, right? So she learned how to deal with weird interactions in the supermarket on the internet. She learned how to figure out what hormones her body needed, so how to take Spiro, or what sticking an estrogen needle in her life would be like. So she learned all this stuff on the internet at a really young age. Of course, there was nothing wrong with her being a girl. I'm sure some of you are women here too. But the problem was when she told people that she was a girl, wasn't really met with a ton of joy, right? And because of that, she had to disassociate. When she disassociated, it created a bunch of weird things in her life. Because she was like, well, if I can't be a girl, then maybe I'll just drink or do drugs. But she's pretty young, so that's a bad idea. So she's like, no, maybe love will solve this, right? I could just fall in love with somebody, and it would be so great to have them cure all this stuff for me. But then that didn't work either. So she finally went back to the internet, and she was like, what do I do? And the internet was like, no problem, answered this question before. And they gave her two options. The first option was that she could like just black out, like kind of put it in the back burner, deal with it at a later date, right? And the second option was that she could bail and go to like New York or San Francisco. She was in rural America and she was like 15. There was no way she was about to like leave her home and life, right? She blacked out. The thing about blacking out is like, it can be not the healthiest decision, right? And as you like, work through this, you have to develop these things called coping mechanisms to work through your blackout. So again, she started drinking, she started doing drugs, she started working through all these really hard things. And she was doing it all alone, which like left her feeling really conflicted about the whole world. Eventually though, she got stubborn. And when she got stubborn, she was able to get what she needed. And the more stubborn she was able to be, the more like she started taking like more risks with her identity, the more like she wasn't willing to make compromises with herself. And she got access. Now the cool thing about that story is it's about me. And I'm here because I made this site called My Trans Health. My Trans Health is a resource designed to help trans people get access to quality healthcare. Basically, like our whole thing is that trans and gender nonconforming people deserve culturally competent healthcare, as like all of you do who aren't trans here too, right? So it's pretty basic, like core human concept. And we launched this site by basically doing like a Kickstarter/YouTube video. And it was just me talking about my own experience that I just shared with you. And basically how I heard from therapists over and over again that like they didn't have the tools for me, which is what a shitty therapist would tell you. But we also put like 9 other trans people in like a camera setting and like they said the similar thing. So we kind of thought that we had like a concept that might be able to drive home. We could figure out like how to get resources for this thing. And once we like got Kickstarter materials ready together, we were like, okay, this is good, but are designers gonna care about this? Do I give a shit what designers think? Like, am I only cared about like the people that I'm affecting? But I wanted to figure out a way to get like a cultural conversation around trans healthcare to happen. And we decided to do something pretty unique in that we launched the week Caitlyn Jenner came out. Now, like I have the most complicated feelings about her in this entire world, probably more than most folks here. But there was something about it though, like she gave us space to steal her spotlight. And when it came to like so many DIY things happening in the trans world at that time, like resources were so limited and it was so difficult to even get a seat at the table. So with her sort of leverage, we took this idea that Teek Milan had, and he gave this talk at like a Philly Trans Health Conference. And he basically said, like, you gotta Kanye this moment. And I was like, holy shit, dude, you're right. That's cool, I love Kanye. So he got on stage, right, and he was like, Caitlyn, I'm gonna let you finish, but 19% of us have experienced abuse from our own families. Like, it can be weird to parse out data, right? But like 19% of an entire community had experienced mental and physical abuse from their own families. That's fucked up. Caitlyn, I'm gonna let you finish, but 41% of us have tried to kill ourselves. Also not a good stat. Like, it's not, like, it's just a really complicated thing, right? And we're cool that Caitlyn was able to transition and get her things that she needed, like, that's rad. But there's a cultural conversation happening with an entire community, and it's not being met under this umbrella of just like a rich white old woman transitioning. And then for us in particular, Caitlyn, I'm gonna let you finish, but we still need fucking access to quality healthcare. The press ate this shit up. That was cool, right? Like I was just like, holy shit, this thing's working, that's cool. I was a freelancer at the time, like barely getting by, and I was like, wow, Business Insider just called me brilliant. That's a weird feeling. And with every sort of press came with like pieces being like, well, tell me about a story of your life, right? Like they couldn't just cover the product like you would cover a weather app. Like they wanted to pry a piece out of me for it. So I couldn't ever get press for free without them taking a piece of me. And I gave it all to them, right? Because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, well, you can have all these stories, like every single one of them, you get them all. But the problem with that was I wasn't like done working through any of them. So my misery basically became a sight to see for people to consume. And I was still working through it. So when I'm going on like these interviews with publications and I'm talking about like the time that I tried to kill myself, or the time that I was sexually assaulted, or the time that I couldn't get access to hormones and just like was barely getting by, I was just giving those stories away for free. And I hadn't even gone to therapy to deal with it. And moreover, like there's an entire population of designers and people who are so fucking obsessed with coming up with the most witty and inclusive restroom sign when I can't even think about a more useless problem to solve in the trans community. And like, let's be real about this, it's gonna take a lot more than a new icon to save trans lives. And moreover, like, I feel so fragile about this entire community. Like, it's an entire community built on trust. It's built on like making sure you deliver the right thing in the right way. It's making sure that like, it's not too corporate. There's all these like sort of breaks within the community, right? And I know it's fragile, right? And I'm still dealing with my own shit. I freaked out. Like, there was no way for me to possibly design this thing as well as I wanted to, knowing what was going on in my life. And like, as the press kind of died down, as I calmed through, I started to do two different things to help me work through it. The first is I volunteered for a suicide hotline. Trans Lifeline does fantastic work. They're great. And I was able to talk to tons of trans people throughout the months that I worked on this product about the stuff that they were going through. One night in particular, I took a call from a 14-year-old in Iowa, like rural Iowa, who was like, I'm a trans girl and I can't get anything. And I could feel the panic in their breath. Like, I felt it so deep within me because it was a panic that I knew. And I was like, no, it's cool, it's cool. Like, I'll just Google some stuff for you and we'll figure out like a therapist that will talk to you. And like, it was like, that was the site working just in a very analog way. And I was like, okay, well that's working. But like, there was a panic in their voice. So whatever I design, it has to be cool and calm. Like, I can't bum you out. I can't make you feel bad about being trans. I gotta just like make sure that you're comfortable and like maybe even a little excited about doing this thing. And the second thing is, I told you guys I was broke. I was camgirling while I made this site. Like, it was before I got scooped up by big tech. I was just kind of like making it through. So at nights, I would basically cam and like hook off like with men and just get paid to do that while I was designing this site. The cool thing about that experience is that like, if you want to get like into user research for like this product, this is where it's at. Like, there are trans girls in this community and they're dealing with real life shit and they do not have a ton of resources. And like, they'll tell you exactly what's working and what's not working in a very quick and clear way. And it was like at the point where I had like a working prototype and I was just like, I feel really smooth about this UI, right? Like, this thing looks cool. And I sent it over to one of the cam girls. I was like, hey, tell me what you think. And she was like, looks cool, too slow, gotta go, bye. Like, she was looking to get paid and I was like, fuck yeah, get yours. But like in the process, I was like, whoa, I need to make sure that this site is fast. So I couldn't like bog you down into question, into question, and question. I had to get you in and get you out. So you got what you needed and you were able to go on with your life. So coupling that idea of like delight with speed, I got obsessed with the design and I stopped thinking about my own personal shit. I just let it go and put it in the background. And the more I let go, the more I was able to do stuff like this. So I was starting with user research and I was tackling that. Played with the UX, the UI, the interface. I figured out, all the complicated bits that come with designing any product, right? And a cool thing happened. A few months later, we looked up and we had a site. We're in 6 locations right now with 450 providers, including San Francisco. By the end of like this month / early next month, we'll be with this new site design, and we'll have 1,000 providers in 20 locations. Good thing too is it won't be just coastal. So like we went to Evansville, Indiana, and we talked to people about how they do like trans healthcare. So we're really excited about that, and we felt good. Like, it was just like, holy shit, like this is awesome. No. It was like we were riding this super high mountain and then it was just getting punched in the face. It screwed up everything. And it was weird because like, I didn't know what to do, right? It was just like, well, this site is good, but not that great. Like, we're dealing with an entire government. And I started to think about like, just like everything that was happening. And one day I was like kind of leaving to go to work and I had my hand on like a doorknob and I was getting ready to leave my apartment. And I heard like the people I live in like one of those hotel buildings. So there's like a lot of different complexes in the space. And I heard this couple fighting, like really fighting, going at it. And she's like screaming at this guy, being like, I can't believe you fucking cheated on me. I couldn't believe like you hurt me. And she's crying, like losing her mind, crying. And I sat there and I was just listening to it. And at first I was listening to make sure that she was okay. But then I just found myself listening because I realized that like I hadn't felt that like in a real way. Like it wasn't that I was like envious of her hurt, but I was envious that she was able to be hurt. Like at some point in her life, she learned to be vulnerable enough in a relationship to be hurt. And this guy screwed her over, and that sucks, but she felt it, and it was so real. And I started to think about the kids who are going to transition right now during this administration, beyond just my trans health, right? Like, what about the kids and like the lessons they're learning from a community right now about how they grew up? Like, what lingers? Because the stuff that I went through still was kind of in the back of my head. Like, I worked through a lot of it, but it's kicking in there. So all this cultural conversation around bathrooms, that doesn't just go away. That continues and stays with them, which is complicated because like, we'll be over this issue in a few months, but that will linger with them for the rest of their lives. And we gotta be better. So here's how we do that. It's a fun little segment that I like to call How to Show the Fuck Up. It's a 5-parter. The first is to be a micro designer. So the people in this room, you're all very good at what you do, right? Trans people are also really good at what we do. And when it comes to this stuff, we have like a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas and a lot of like projects that we want to work on to help our own community. That big macro vision stuff, the concept, the direction, the influence, that's on us. We can do that. But when it comes down to resourcing, we might need some help at times. So if you do run into somebody who's working on something and like could use some help like doing some data entry or like whatever it is, be that person. Just show up and be like, oh no, it's cool. Like I got 10 extra hours, it's fine. Like we'll help you out and get through that. So be a micro designer. 2, you can just give your money to people. Like, that's kind of like a cool thing, right? So Transgender Law Center, Trans Women of Color Collective, and Trans Lifeline, they all do such good work in the community, and like they just need resources to keep it up. So give your money to people. You all have the internet. Google these people. The third thing, despite like all of our wishes in this whole world, elected officials actually don't give a shit about our feelings. But what they do give a shit about is our vote. So call them, let them know. This is your state governor in California. You can call them today and be like, hey, just want to let you know, you don't get my vote next time unless you show up for trans kids, for trans youth, for trans women, for trans men. Like, you just don't get it. That's going to get their attention. That will get them to do things. Number 4, diversity in tech, LOL. Diversity in tech matters. I'm with you, I'm there. But what really matters is diversity in leadership. Like if you're hiring a bunch of interns out, like good for you, like that's awesome. But are those interns in leadership meetings where decisions get made? Because that's where that voice really matters. So for sure, hire diverse people. I'm 100% with you. But when somebody calls you out, when you put them in the room, you listen to every fucking word that they say. Number 5, this is a 3-parter. Give all your money to Latina trans women. All of it, everything you own. Give all your money to brown trans women. You can split this up, there's a lot of people here, it's chill. Give all your money to black trans women. If you look at the history of any sort of resistance across any year whatsoever, it comes down to trans women of color. Like that is where every fucking core idea comes out of. You look at the work of Sylvia Rivera, you look at the work of Marsha P. Johnson, even contemporaries now like Laverne Cox or Janet Mock. These are the people that are putting in the work, right? It's them. So like I can stand up here as like a white trans girl and talk about my trans health, and for sure, it's a good thing. But that whole project does not exist without Teak Milan. It does not exist without Janet Mock. It does not exist without all these people. So give all your money to them. Thanks.
Is my mic on? Hi. So as you know, this is an independent design event. This is something that Gabe, that Julio and I came together and built, but we couldn't build it by ourselves. We needed companies who believed in our values and wanted to support them to give their money to us to make this event happen. So I want to recognize Figma as one of our best sponsors tonight. Figma team, where are you at? I know you're here. Figma made sense to support vectors because they're building a platform that's mostly free, that's browser-based, device agnostic, that helps designers design for free. I don't know if any of you remember the days where we paid like $1,500 for a license to a piece of software that determined our industry, that determined our jobs. We're in a new era where that's not how tools work. Tools are democratic, and when you make tools accessible to people, people get to build. And when you get to build as a Mexican woman, as a Cuban guy, of any color, height, interest, sexuality, race, location, language, that means something. So I want to please give a round of applause to Figma for helping us make this possible. And I hope you check out their awesome platform in the future. Peace.
Hello. Hi. How are you guys doing? Can do better than that. All right. Hi. So my name is Alex Valdivia. I'm an interaction designer at Blogger. Every day I help people tell their stories all over the world, their unique stories in their unique voice. And today I'm really, really excited to be the one who gets to share some of my story with you guys. So thank you so much for allowing me to do this. It's going to be really tough to follow these first people who went before me. That was really awesome. Before we get started, though, since we're already clapping for people, let's clap again for all these people who put this conference together. I think this is awesome. All right, enough about them. It's about me. So I'm just going to tell you a story. I'm just going to tell you my story. Hope that you guys can make something out of it. So this is a story about chaos. Not sorting through chaos or decluttering it, but about embracing it. So let's start with a word about style. This was a recurring theme during college, or rather the lack of it, lack of style. Professors everywhere kept repeating that designers are not supposed to have a style. We are supposed to be this stoic, impartial, problem-solving machines. And we're supposed to take ourselves out of the equation to solve the problems of the companies that we're representing. I've always had a problem with this. I thought it was obtuse and a little bit mediocre. I still do. I saw the lines between an artist and a designer and an illustrator and an engineer blurring all the time. So when I heard this in college, this was super confusing. It was problematic. See, illustrators and artists, they spend years trying to develop a style, and we're supposed to get rid of ours. So I'm a designer, but I'm also a musician. I'm an illustrator, and every now and then I even call myself an artist. So you see my problem with this. I'm nothing but style. So I'm the son of a doctor and an accountant. I was born in communist Cuba in the 1980s. If you don't know, if you don't know anything about communist Cuba, you should know this. They have a lot of rules, very strict rules over there. Everything in communism is made up of rules and straight lines. These societies, they need people to follow the rules in order to keep existing. So they go to really great lengths to get them to stay compliant. As you can probably imagine, this doesn't leave a lot of room for style or for diversity. My father, he was formed in communist Cuba and very much subscribed to the ideology at the time. He had very well-defined ideas of what a person should be, the person who would live and lead this society that they were trying to build. So he made every conceivable effort to raise me and my brother in accordance to these ideas. In fact, most people had a really clear idea of who they would be and what they would become. Identity was deeply linked into not only your self-worth, but your worth as a member of that society. So once you found a calling, you kind of stuck with it. So during the early years of my childhood, I was very much a product of this environment. I learned the songs, I wore the uniforms, I repeated the mantras, and I thought the world was this set of boxes that everything and everyone would eventually fit in. Until I turned 10. And my family, seemingly out of nowhere, at least from my perspective as a 10-year-old, they just decided to pack everything and uproot my family and move to the very, very capitalistic Republic of Costa Rica. If you don't know anything about Costa Rica, you should know this. It's just like the United States, but smaller, and with a lot more fresh fruit. So this is how I became an immigrant at the age of 10. So you may be thinking at this point, big deal. Everybody has a story to tell in California, in the United States, in the world. There's a lot of immigrants, and they all go through hardships. So first of all, this is my story, and it's the only one I have, so deal with it. But I submit to you that the set of circumstances that led to my particular migration and what came afterwards might be interesting to you, and you might be able to solve this problem about style with this chaos. So mine wasn't a really difficult migration, relatively speaking. I didn't have to escape in a raft or anything like that. There was no drama. I just got on a plane and moved. Easy, right? But what I didn't know was that right at that point, I was about to enter a world of absolute chaos that would become deeply embedded in my identity and ultimately a main source for creativity. So becoming an immigrant right off the bat made me learn a valuable lesson. There are multiple ways to look at things. This is easy to say, but I had to live it and make it part of myself. So it's because of this that I try to see problems from multiple perspectives and consider multiple points of view without kind of fixating on my own. This became so ingrained into who I am that it kind of helped me be more at peace with the world and with my choices. But together with me, I might need you to understand something. My family's core values, the things that made us who we were, they were oftentimes the exact opposite to Costa Rican values, and by extension, most capitalistic societies. While communist Cuba valued the rights and dignities of the community, there's no private property, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Capitalist Costa Rica valued those of the individual over everything else. There are several profit models. You take care of yourself and yours, and everything else will follow. So by sheer experimentation, I learned that it's precisely going from one extreme to the other that kind of makes up your social, political, aesthetic, and philosophical views, which is, by the way, pretty much everything under that design considerations umbrella. So I learned to live with this conflict, and eventually I learned to thrive with it. Being a 10-year-old individual, and after passing out from drinking soda, eating candy, and watching Power Rangers, which were all new things to me, this move felt like an upgrade most of the time, but also felt like a rejection of most of my previous life, and thus a part of myself, an important part of myself. You see, when you leave Cuba, at least back then, you were not simply calling a new place home and dealing with the challenges of that new adventure. You were also losing your status as a citizen, your material possessions, your house, your bike, and were effectively committing a very modest act of treason. Seeing our grandparents or our friends again, it was a bit of a naive dream. It wasn't supposed to happen. In fact, I would never again visit Cuba without feeling like a foreigner myself, like a stranger in my own country. So while this bucket of chaos was brewing, in fact, because of it, I was about to start developing an identity as a person, points of views, abilities, affinities that were very much permeated by the journey I was already in. I developed a passion for music, for literature, art, and went on a never-ending quest for beauty. Eventually, I did search within enough to see myself as all of those things. A painter, a musician, an altruist, all glowing pillars of the society I had left behind. But I agonized over the conflict of wanting a hefty paycheck. As I grew up, I had to come to terms with wanting to be an artist and having enough money not only to pay for rent, that was a thing, but also to make my whole journey worth it. The journey that my whole family was going through into this new place. So I wanted to solve real problems, tangible problems, material problems, problems that were mostly relevant to this new society. It took me a while to detangle this mess. In a way, I'm still kind of working on it. But now I can make more sense of it. Growing up, I struggled trying to find my calling and trying to follow any given path to the end. This was not only me, by the way. My whole family was going through this. My father, for example, he had his own dosage of chaos. He was a doctor in communist Cuba, and all of a sudden he had to come to terms with privatized medicine, social security payments, pharmaceuticals, lobbying doctors and treating them as clients. It was crazy for him. He had to redefine not only who he was as a person, but who he was as a professional in the most fundamental levels. Like if a person comes to you for help, like real life and death help, and you're the only person who can help them, and you, on top of that you charge them, does that make you a good person? Is that okay? These are the kind of questions we were dealing with. Later in life, we decided to move back to, we decided to move to the States. And I found myself in college trying to learn everything I could about graphic design. I saw design as a destination in this journey. I was in this path of confusion and conflict ever since I was 10, so this was a big deal. I had lived in a world of extremes and bounced back between them, between two different ways to look at life, right? This led me to study music and later seek a career as a fine artist, then another one in advertising, and then later reject all of them to a degree in favor of design. It wasn't until I saw the work of people like David Carson or James Victore, who combined problem-solving abilities with their unique ways to see the world, and even dare venture out into their own side projects shamelessly, that I understood design as this perfect amalgamation of aesthetics and altruism and objective problem solving. So everything that was unique about my story, you know, the constant pull between left and right, the shifting values of these societies, the identity crisis that my whole family has navigated while traveling to the American continent, were also the things that made me me. It was because of this story, my story, that I decided to use my own confusion, my personal chaos as a superpower, and channeled it into my work. Just like my father had to redefine who he was in the face of a different reality, I embraced my own, kind of bit of a testament of who I was. Now, this is not devoid of conflict in itself. Like everybody here today, I'm going to have to wrestle with this question. If you have superpowers and you decide to use them, are you the hero or the villain? But maybe that's a different talk. So I can help to go back, but go back to the why, right? Why should you care about this? This is my chaos and mine alone. You all are different people with different stories and different outlooks and a different set of values, and at the end, a different chaos. But maybe that's the point. You have your own chaos, so you should find your own way to use it. If you walk out of here with anything, let it be this. Chances are that you're not an immigrant or disabled or an artist or a minority, but I assure you, you have your chaos. So I invite you to find what's unique about your story, how do you get here, and start using that as your own superpower. These little boxes that we create for ourselves won't always make sense. So you should use these powers to step outside of them. You are the sum of your choices, the choices of your parents, the environment that formed you, and more importantly, all the lessons that you learned from it. As designers, as creators, as human beings, this is our style. And not bringing it into our work might be irresponsible, but at the end of the day, I think it's impossible. So don't take yourselves out of the equation. Chase your style, hone your style, and own it. So in a world where we're supposed to always give the best of ourselves all the time, we should be able to own the best of ourselves, even when that's pure, unadulterated, unapologetical chaos. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, there we go. All right. How you guys been so far? Yeah, cool. Nothing has broke yet, so we're good. So for the next half hour, I figure we kind of chat. I have some of my favorite designers here. I'm a fan of all you guys individually, but as a group, this feels like the Avengers of the design panel, so I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah. So some of you guys might not know them, so I figured maybe we can go really quickly. Say your name, your role, and maybe the weirdest thing you've ate recently. You ate recently. Kathy, you want to start?
Hello? Can you guys hear me okay? Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Kathy. I am a product designer at Instagram. Okay, hey. I also do a lot of work at Facebook at the Interlock Research Lab. That's where we create a lot of our posters, and it's just like a lot of internal culture initiatives are being initiated there. And so I'll show you some of the work later on. But the weirdest thing I ate, not sure.
Did I make something up then?
I'll come back to that.
Howdy, I'm Dana Lawson. I'm the VP of Engineering at inVision. I'm the only non-designer up here. Oh, cool. I'm the one that y'all get mad at when I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's probably not going to happen. It's cool, though, but probably not going to happen. I'm that person. I have the beautiful opportunity of getting to work with designers at working in inVision, and I'm just super honored to be here, to be able to talk to y'all and be with this awesome panel. Weirdest thing I've eaten. I'm going to have to say 2 a.m. Jack in the Box tacos. It's pretty weird. Don't do it. They're gross.
I remember what I
delicious.
ate recently. Chili mangoes. Yeah, it's good, but it's like
mangoes?
weird. Yeah.
Interesting. Was it a mango
It was like
with
just-
chili components, or was it a chili with mango?
It's like dried mango with chili. It was really good.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm Chikizi Giassi. I'm currently a senior product designer at Google. I work on VR on the Daydream team. Been there for about 6 months or so. It's interesting coming from 2D and designing for VR is a really interesting transition, getting to design in a 3D space. So I get to be an interior designer sometimes. It feels good. Weirdest thing I've eaten is either a tie between, so I grew up in the Midwest for context, and it seemed everybody ate mayo and fries. which is like really odd, but it was delicious. So it was weird, but it was good. And then the most recent weird thing I've eaten, and I just can't get used to it, and everybody loves it, is kale. It's just like, I can't. It just feels really weird. It like tickles your mouth, and it's just really strange. Yeah, I can't do it.
Hi, everyone. So I'm also not a designer. My name is Sheryl Chang. I'm one of the general partners at an early stage venture firm called Bluerun Ventures. In a previous life, I used to do new products for Clorox and Procter & Gamble. So not on the design side, but much more on the consumer insight side. And now, probably more reviled than you is me in my role as an investor, because we're very bottom line driven, right? And so at every meeting we're asking, what are the results? What are the results? So let's see. The strangest thing I ate recently was the Mother's Day breakfast that my children cooked for me, and I still don't know what I ate. But it came. I didn't ask. I just ate it, and then I went back to bed. Yes, it came from the heart, though. So what can you do?
Well, my name is Jacinda Walker. I'm a graphic designer by trade, but a few years ago, chucked it all and quit my good government job with my corner office and a window and indoor heated parking. And I decided to go to graduate school. I got an offer from The Ohio State University. And I just finished doing my research work with looking at diversity and design disciplines. I also own and operate a design education business named Design Explore. We offer youth activities, consulting with clients, and we also have an amazing website that we're trying to build out. And I also have the opportunity of being the chair of AIGA's Diversity and Inclusion Task Force for the national level. So I work very closely with 72 chapters nationwide and 27,000 members. So that's kind of what I do. Oh, and the weirdest thing, one time I was in New Orleans, and I ate something called a gator kebab. It tastes like sausage.
Great. Awesome. Cool. So this panel is called Untapped Potential, and I figured we can get together and talk about the D word, right? Not that one, but diversity. So yeah, diversity. And so some people might think that there's an archetype for the right designer or worker, right? And that person might look a certain way, they might act a certain way. So I'm curious, why is it important to challenge that archetype?
Stereotypes are never good. I mean, when as creatives, when we come up with personas and archetypes, we're really talking about stereotypes in a very covert, creative manner. We're really talking about these stereotypes. So what happens if what you perceive as happy really isn't my happy? So you, again, have used your bias in a manner that's going to influence the rest of us. So I understand we do it, and I understand why, but there's really some care there. I love the last presenter who talked about using, your superpowers for good. And so what are you going to do now that you know this?
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, I don't know where I saw it, back when I actually had cable. I saw this piece about there is this guy from Britain, and he would walk to people's houses, and he would convince them that he was like an interior designer or like some sort of like expert in something. And they believed him. They would just like go into their house and he'd make these recommendations. Then there'd be like this reveal that, oh, actually I'm not an interior designer or whatever. I'm just some random guy, and you just like let me in your house. But there was this added perception of because I have like a British accent, I'm like really good at like this like thing. And I think there's really interesting kind of like reverse kind of directive there about if it was like me that walked up to your house, like would you believe me? Like would you let me in your house? So it's just interesting, like when we challenge or like when we present these commonplace archetypes, they can manifest in like very negative ways, especially like when random black people show up at your door. Like how do you treat that person, right? You don't expect them to be like an expert in design or like an expert in code. So I think it's really interesting to start challenging that stuff now. But I think you have to do it across multiple industries, including Hollywood, because they are one of the main reinforcers of those things?
So my industry is probably one of the least diverse industries in tech. And, we do what we can. But I think one of the reasons why diversity is important to me, both from a design perspective as well as just as an investor, is because human beings have natural biases and they draw from our past. It's not a good thing or a bad thing, they're just naturally there. And so when you see a problem or you see an opportunity, you see it through a different lens. And unless you have diversity on your team, be it designing a problem or a product for a problem or making a decision whether you're going to invest millions of dollars, you have to be able to approach it from multiple perspectives. And when you don't, you end up as a team collectively, because you're all individually sort of the same, from maybe the same stereotype, making the same decisions over and over again. And sometimes those are good, but oftentimes you'll also make the same mistakes over and over again. And over time, it can be very toxic. So to me, that's one of the things that I think is really important to avoid as much as possible. And to one of the speakers earlier, it's important at the decision-making level, not just from the creative level or everybody who's doing the work, but the people who get the final say, right? Is there diversity in thought at that point? And that's where I think we have a little bit of a chokehold right now. So,
yeah, no, that sounds great. Sounds almost obvious. So, I'm curious, like, what?
You would think.
Yeah, like how do we get here? Like, what? If it makes so much sense in theory, in practice, why are we in an industry that is not diverse?
Oh, well, I've been doing this now almost 20 years. Believe it or not, I know I look like I'm 27. But I think it's fear. I think a lot of it's fear, and a person once said to me very recently, likes. It's this amazing principal engineer from Intel. She's been with them like 25 years. And she says, the reason is because you don't see people represented. You don't see people up here like this. You don't see conferences like there. When I was a kid, growing up on the border of Texas and southeast New Mexico, you never heard about women in engineering. There's like, you're staying at home making babies and like doing baby stuff. And obviously I have very high nurturing skills. And I think that, I think there's a fear in it, because when you don't have that commonality to connect, there's this fear that, just like Chikizi was saying, it's like, some rando showing up at your house, you're like, they can't do that. So by having this, it kind of breaks down those barriers and says, you know what, you can do what you want to do. And having people that represent you shows that if they're doing it too, then so can you. And so I think a big portion of it is just people are scared. They're scared of not being around people they're like. And the world is about not being around people you're like, because we're shoved with this image of this is who you are, this is what you represent, this is how you're going to do it. And if you have any kind of variance in that, you're like, oh, I'm stuck in this little box of only doing this one particular thing, or I'm outcast and not given that opportunity. And I truly believe that that's been the reason for a long time, is there hasn't been representation, but there's not been representation because there hasn't been a platform, and there hasn't been a platform because people are scared. But I don't know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, and I also feel like, in the past, there hasn't been a lot of visibility. So like conferences like this never existed. I remember, I've been in this industry for about 15 years, just I see white European guys being represented in design publications when I was going to school, and that's all I know. Designers should be a certain way, and then so when I was first starting out, I was feeling really not confident as a designer, and then also not being treated with a lot of respect, just as women. Coming from I was born in Taiwan. I don't speak, I didn't learn how to speak English until I got here. So language has always been something, I feel really insecure about. Even now, I ask my wife to read my email for me sometimes, because even though I'm getting really good at it, but there's something you always feel I'm incompetent, or you're afraid to speak up. And then so I think slowly, I'm just so glad that we're being more visible, have opportunity to kind of elevate conversation and just get together and share our experiences. It's really important.
Jacinda, I know you have some historical context that maybe would be helpful to share.
Yeah, no. I do tons of context. I don't know, are we gonna go through the slides?
Yeah.
Yes, great. So doing this type of research work means you have to really get deep down in history. So I'm about to really geek out, so I don't want you guys to get scared, okay? Don't be nervous, because I got some real shadiness to tell y'all. So I'm gonna make sure that I stay on script, but I just want to tell y'all this. So during my research of diversity and design disciplines, I found that the lack of diversity unfolds with the beginning of John F. Kennedy's presidency. After years of segregation and investigations about racial inequalities, JFK, he begins conversations with many leaders and officials to get input and support for a bill about civil rights. Now, a lot of people try to ask me, and they say, well, lack of diversity in design, it started from slavery, right? No, diversity in design, the lack of diversity in design did not come from slavery. The reason that JFK's request for civil rights is so important is because we never had that request from the top. There was never that request. It was always a request from, as we like to say nowadays in social justice work, community activism, grassroots. You know, these are code words from the bottom up. And so when JFK started doing this, he sent a ripple around the United States. I mean, the world was watching us. But on June 11th, in 1963, the University of Alabama was forced to desegregate. This was a big deal for JFK because he had been kind of tap dancing around the issue a little bit. He was afraid to do it. He didn't get great election numbers. People were concerned that if he was the one who brought it up, are you going to get reelected? And so he was tap dancing around it. But when he had to literally call the National Guard down to the University of Alabama and tell George Wallace, get the hell up out the way, he had the confidence to come and make this announcement. So he desegregated University of Alabama, like let's just say 1 o'clock. He was on the television at 8 p.m. that night telling people, this is what I'm about to do. He asked Congress to think about creating and looking into what he called a moral crisis. He announced that he was going to ask Congress to commit that it has fully made this country possible, that he wanted to be able to say in a bill legally that race had no right, it had no position in the way we were operating in government. So after he makes this huge speech, people are falling out, people are nervous, and he took a lot of heat. He spends months going back and forth with the House and the Congress trying to get this bill passed. Finally, in October, the House passes the bill. Finally, he's assassinated 4 weeks later. It hurt. Now, after the death, okay. After the death of Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson is sworn in. He spends the next 8 months with help from many leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and Whitney Young to get Kennedy's bills passed. They want to maintain his legacy here, all right? But in doing so, he had to make a few concessions. Everybody knows what a concession is, right? Raise the hands, yes? A sacrifice. You got to give something up. He had to compromise. So the bill wasn't going to actually have sex in it. It was just going to say race. But he had to concede with religion, and he had to add sex. He had to add. So these are some types of things he did. Next slide. And in July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Bill was signed. Now, after the signing, many thought that the hard part was over. But in reality, the hard part was just beginning, because many organizations and institutions began to silently oppose the new law with policies specifically targeting the folks who were just awarded their civil liberties. Now, one of the institutions and who had unfair policies and practices was the American Institute of Architects. And in 1968, Whitney Young addressed the AIA about their silence during this crisis and allowing this to continue to happen. And in all actuality, this is the first time we hear about the lack of diversity in design. So we've been talking about this and asking about this since 1968, and we still have not made it. Now, unfair policies and practices that result in differential access to goods, services, and opportunities of a society by race is called institutionalized racism. And we see this a lot in healthcare, housing, education, you name them. Next slide. Now, another big bite in the workforce when we talk about the history components of this is the amount of people incarcerated. You have to understand that over the last 40 years, the incarceration numbers have increased 300%. The privatization of prisons have literally taken a hit in our population. Data indicates that one out of every 3 black men, 1 out of every 6 Latino men, versus 1 out of every 17 white men are in prison right now. The United States imprisons 25% of the world's population. So we're only 5% of the entire world, but we imprison 25% of the entire world's population. Now, Michelle Alexander writes a lot about this in her new book called The New Jim Crow. Now, ramifications of the Civil Rights Act, institutionalized racism, and mass incarceration may have been seen throughout the design profession in the form of detrimental attitudes in education, discriminatory hiring practices, cultural insensitivities in advertising, and minimal diversity building initiatives. So these are the things a thesis and 4 years of research work will get you to know.
Yeah.
So I know that was a lot. I know it was a lot, but you wanted the history.
Totally. No, that's great. I guess now that we know this, the question is like, what do we do, right? And at all levels, what do we do as employees, as CEOs, as designers who make products? Like, really, what can we do, and what's available for us to take action?
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that we have to really think about, and this is something that we're working heavily with in AIGA, is that we're beginning to look at the design journey. Because if we continue to think the lack of diversity exists is one problem, we'll never solve it. What we have to understand and accept is that it's multiple problems along the journey. So depending on where you fall is the problem that you're having. So if you're in the beginning of your journey, it might be access and exposure. But if you're in the middle part, it might have something to do with opportunity. And if you're nearing the end, which hopefully you'll come back and help in the beginning, but if you're nearing the end, that's gonna really look like value. You know, that's when we start talking about these glass ceilings, we talk about management, we talk about who's making these types of decisions. So if we begin to think of it as a journey and problem solving along the journey, we may actually solve it.
Kathy, you've been involved with some semi-activism right through your work?
Yeah, so I want to talk to you guys about some of the work I've done recently and how it kind of relevant to working at Facebook too. So first I want to also just talk about like the importance of building company culture, because culture is a set of values that's core to everything we create. So it needs to reflect people within the company, their voice, and also the people that we're building product for. So it's really, really important. So that's one thing beyond doing product design work. You know, all the things you see later, it's all like time I put in on the weekends and late nights. It's something I feel really passionate about, because I remember, like, you know, just in my past experience, being at companies that didn't cultivate that kind of culture and made me feel really alienated. So I want people who work at Facebook and Instagram, like even beyond that, now being able to kind of like empower people and make them feel like comfortable and share their experience and just feel like, you know, they're accepted. So we you know, at Facebook we use posters. We love posters, and that's how we kind of like communicate. And I remember when I first joined the company, I met Ben Berry. He was the founder of the Analog Research Lab, And I was very fortunate I got to talk to him. He showed me around campus, and I was surprised. I was like, wow, anyone can just like put a poster on the wall. And he said, yeah, if you want to have democracy, you want to give people a voice, you can't just say, oh, someone can put an ugly art, like, no, you can't do it. Or like, your art is better than, someone else's. And that's kind of the, sort of like the risk you run into, but it's also the beauty of it. So that's the advice I give to everyone now, like when they first start working there. It's like, you don't need permission to do anything. If you want to share your voice, just like put something on the wall, like even just like write a post and talk about it. And then so some of the things you'll see here, like I teach classes at the Interlock Research Lab. I work with a lot of, we have these employee resource groups at Facebook that are Black at, Pride at, Women at. So I do a lot of diversity kind of like design work with them. And then so teaching people how to make their own posters and share their own message is very empowering. And so these are just some pictures that you see like I've done over the years working with different teams at Facebook. And we,
As we stay here in this like, company culture topic, I'm curious, like, I know, Chikisi, you have some thoughts to share here, and maybe then we can expand it beyond your company.
Yeah, I think there's obviously two things that are pretty obvious to us. Hire a diverse team and keep that team diverse. I think the question of how to hire that diverse team is obviously a pretty contested one. I think the answers that we know is, okay, like it's a pipeline problem. Like there just isn't enough talent. Like one, that's false. The talent is there, we're just not finding it. But there's also some nuance to it a little bit, like where we're not doing a good job at educating young kids that these opportunities exist. For example, every year we do like a Take Your Kids to Work Day event at Google. Pretty typical, like all the Googlers bring in their kids. It's a lot of fun. And we do a workshop where we do like a 10x thinking workshop, and we ask them to imagine like, what does your school look like 50 years from now? And it's really interesting, like when the Googlers bring in their kids, they're thinking about a lot of ideas, they're doing like paper prototypes, they're imagining like, okay, I want to like take a teleporter and I want to like go visit like India, and I want to come back and like use that stuff and like bring it back home. And they're using some pretty grand things that we talk about. It's actually pretty fascinating to see like 9 and 10-year-olds use the same terminology. And it was interesting, like we branched out and we did that same workshop for kids at school districts like Oakland and Hayward. And it was really interesting to see how the ideas were the same, but the technology was different. It was more practical. It was just about books. It was just about having access to the same things that other kids had. So it's just interesting that the idea of being like a designer, the idea of being a developer just wasn't penetrating. So one, just inspiring kids today that these things exist is hugely important. And two, one thing that I don't really hear about the hiring process that I think is really important is having a conversation with your team to make sure that everybody there is comfortable with the team as being diverse. This sounds ridiculous. This sounds crazy, but you'll be surprised at how many people don't actually want to be part of a diverse team. They might not expose it right away, but they'll just, they will be the toxic part of your team if you don't resolve it. And the worst thing they can do is when you hire diverse talent, that person is going to take the blunt of all of that trauma. And then the second part of like, how do you like retain that person, right? I can only really speak to this in the context of a designer. I think a developer is definitely relevant. And I'm sure I love working with you. But one of the most important things is giving that designer a voice and an opportunity to grow. And I'm not just saying like, okay, give them like, all the special projects or give them all the projects that tackle like, diversity issues. I'm talking about giving them the opportunity to have a voice in the meeting without having to give them a voice. Give them an opportunity to speak up at the things that they're passionate about, not the things that you're passionate about them solving, right? So for example, one thing that I think is like really vital to our positions as designers is we tell a lot of like user journeys. We take our clients on like user journeys. I think that's beautiful. I think that we can put a client like in a user's shoes. We say, okay, this is Eric. He's a 24-year-old He's going through this product, and this is how this product is going to be better because it works for him. Right? As a black man, like as a designer, I get to actually customize like those stories based off of like my own experience, and that stuff is like unique to clients because they're not seeing it from those angles. So I think like user journeys and actually using like diverse examples is actually a really powerful way to start designing for communities, because you start designing for communities, you start to launch design in these communities. I think that's actually a beautiful thing. Because I actually really love the example that the Bevel product is actually doing. Bevel, if you don't know it, I'm kind of doing a product shout out right now. But they make grooming products for men, for black men. And I think it's like beautiful. You actually look at their about page, and it's like all black men. And it's like all black men and women. It's like, it's just amazing to see that, they're able to like build a narrative like around that product. And they're able to attract all that talent. And that wasn't just because like, hey, we're a diverse team, like we want you to come here. They actually did it through the product. They used the product to like tell that story. And I thought that was beautiful. And I think there's a lot of teams that are obviously trying to do that, but I think once you have people that come from different backgrounds and they can influence the product that they're working on, I think that's a vital thing.
So I do agree that the problem that we're having with diversity and many things, it stems in education. Like my children who are really young, they're not always exposed to the things, and we're not going to see the manifestation of that for another 20 years. But what can we do today? One of the things that I found that's interesting is that when somebody graduates from college, you think they're grown up, that they're an adult, but they're not. They've actually just gone through a certain academic track that doesn't necessarily translate to their forever career. And I think that companies need to think about listening to what their employees are good at, even though that wasn't what they were hired for initially. So, my parents were immigrants, and my parents still do not understand what I do. And if you really kind of dig in, like my dad is a chemical engineer, as all good immigrant Asian men are, because his English wasn't good, but he was really good at math. And so that's how he could make a living in this country. My mom was actually much more creative, but she's the minority voice in our family from like social construct and everything. So I never really heard her voice all while I was growing up saying, go into marketing, go into advertising, I didn't hear it because everybody was so used to listening to dad. And I think the same thing happens in companies. You go in and maybe you start off as an engineer because that's what you studied in college, but maybe you have a passion and an insight. And I think it's part of the company's job after you've hired this pool of talented young people to listen and watch for what they're good at, and then give them the confidence and the access and the skills to maybe change careers. And you don't hear that happen very often. You just hear people get disgruntled, and then they leave, and then they say, I'm just going to go start something new. When really at a place like Google or Facebook, like there's an opportunity to take a young engineer who's maybe not a great engineer and maybe make them a designer. But you have to make the design function approachable to somebody who didn't grow up in it.
You never want to make an engineer a designer, trust me. Every time I give them a prototype, they're like, what the hell are you doing? I'm like, buttons everywhere. I'll make a button for that button. And then I get yelled at. I don't know, I'm in a unique position because, I am an executive. I influence. I have the opportunity to influence who you hire. And I think a big important part is my company is a unique one. I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, inVision's the best, but it is. It really is. But, we're a 100% distributed global company. And by nature, we have the opportunity that a lot of people don't by just hiring anywhere we want. And so my team right now, I have people on every continent except Antarctica. I'm waiting for one of those scientists to become a designer. They should probably become an engineer, though, trust me. But I think it gives you a unique perspective. And the thing that motivates me is, I have a seat at the table. Like, they put me at the, being a lady executive, that's kind of unheard of. Like, down here in San Francisco, I ask around, I'm like, you VP? They're like, you are? I'm like, I am. They don't believe me at first, but I'm like, seriously. And I think by by finding a company that really cares about it. it's going to change, and I want more companies to care about it, because you put people in those positions of leadership, they're going to bring in people that are underrepresented, and that's the first step. Trust the people and listen. I think you've all said it over and over. You have to listen. It's like grassroots doesn't work if nobody's listening at the top. You need to put those people at the top and actually force change, and then it's going to go all the way through. And by having events like this and bringing it to the table and taking that from that subconscious, because a lot of the times it is subconscious, or you hear that word unconscious bias. I call people out on it, and I expect people to do the same for me. But it's about having a grown-up, I'll say it, a grown-up conversation about what makes everything better, because to flip it over when building products, right? That's what I do at the end of the day. I'm responsible to take your amazing ideas, tell you no, and then eventually do them. But there's this term called navel-gazing. Has anybody heard that term, navel-gazing? Navel-gazing is basically when you're so busy just looking at yourself, you don't realize what's going on around you. And so it really loses perspective. And I think, I have a unique position, at least where I'm at today, is by having a global team, we're building a product for everybody. And when you build a product for everybody, then everybody wants to come and be a part of that. And then everybody feels represented. It's kind of like what Chikizi was saying, like, until this amazing company really said what we're targeting, and then we're going to go for it, it would have been probably a bunch of navel gazers not looking at what they can actually accomplish and expand. And so I think really putting emphasis in that, you're going to have some of the best things in the world come out. You're not going to just have this one thing that works for this one person. You're going to have something that works for many. And it really changes your perspective on how you can build product and how you can design for. Because, people aren't binary. I tell my engineers that every day. I'm like, if only we wore robots, it would make my life so much easier. Because then I could just program it away. But the reality is we're multifaceted, and there is no black or white. There's a very wide spectrum of gray or whatever representation. And I think that it's my responsibility to ensure that we don't lose that perspective by participating and speaking up and listening. I think at the end of the day, listening,
So we have an audience here full of designers and people that make products. And I'm curious, how can we then translate all this and actually influence our work? I love this example of some of the work you've done, Kathy, to actually bring your perspective into the product and influence it in a very tangible way. Curious if you can talk about how you can actually bring that into a product.
Yeah, I think just as like I was saying before, like depending on the problem that you're trying to solve, depending on the size of the project, take time, take weeks. Like convince. It's gonna be hard to convince like your clients, but take weeks to understand the problem, and don't put underrepresented people at the end of the process. And you have to like really start thinking about like who are we making this product for, and how can we expand that reach. And I think user journeys again is like one really powerful way, because you can do it with pictures, like really simply. This is a person from an affluent neighborhood. This is a person from a poor neighborhood. This is how they're going to experience this product. Have them side by side. Actually show this person is actually in the affluent neighborhood is actually going to be really happy with this product. This person in a poor neighborhood is actually going to have a really hard time with this product. And then you have to make that decision to say, yes, we are willing to accept that. Right? And I think that'll be much harder for you to do when you actually see that at scale. So I think that's actually one really powerful thing for designers. But I know it's hard. I think one of the biggest things, at least what I experienced, was you're sitting in a meeting and everybody's coming up with ideas. And you actually bring an idea to the table. You think, oh, actually, I have my voice now. I'm here. I made it. Right? This is good. But then you bring up the idea, and they're just like looking at you like just a big stare, just like, I can't empathize with that problem. No, we're not going to do that. So those are one of the problems that I think that we face. That I brought it up. I had the bravery to bring it up. But I didn't have enough support from the people. And that goes back to the original problem of making sure that your team is actually capable of listening to people with different perspectives. So I think visually you can at least use those user journeys, put them side by side of, what, this is something that I'm familiar with, and I'm telling you that this is actually going to suck for these other people, right? But it depends on what you're working on. Yeah.
I think it's also, I can only speak from the perspective of, I see some of my startups, they're in this like incredibly run as fast as possible mode. So they're trying to solve for like problem A, and then they only solve problem A. When I used to work at Clorox and Procter & Gamble, and we would develop new products, we would go into people's homes. We would kind of see how they interacted with everything, even things that were unrelated to what I was trying to build, because it was important to understand the user holistically. And so when they would give you feedback like, oh, this is really hard to open, or this is really hard to close, we'd be like, we would sometimes dismiss them as like, oh, they're just like a minority of people that it doesn't matter. But when you went in to somebody's home, you would realize, oh, these people are disabled, or they're really old, or anybody who's over 50 that has arthritis has a hard time. So there's all these things that you see, but you have to leave Silicon Valley. And I think that's something like my startups have a really hard time with. Like they recruit user groups off Craigslist that are local, and they do all these things, and I'm always like, but that's not who you're only selling to. Like you're selling to all these different people, so you have to go visit them.
Sometimes I think where companies get caught up is definitely in the wanting to make sure everybody wants to be diverse. Like, because really, some people really aren't. But diversity has to be on the front end, and it has to be purposeful. It has to be purposeful. So we kind of can't just tap dance around it like, well, what do you think about having a woman on the team? No, you hire her ass, tell her work starts at 10, get here, guess what? She's the new person on the team. So I think sometimes when we tap dance around it, we miss it, and I feel like we've been tap dancing since 1968, I told y'all. So I don't think we have the luxury to continue to do that. We're in a minority-majority trend right now. So if you don't want to get your teams diverse, in a minute, that's all that's going to be left to hire.
Great. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. We're running out of short on time, but we could talk about this for hours. So if you guys want to keep talking about it, we'll be around after the rest of the speakers are done. But please give a round of applause to the great panelists.
In organizing events, it takes a million micro actions to bring something like this together. It means that we have to reach all of you, that we have to win your hearts over, we have to get you to pony up and buy a ticket, and then even get you to show up. But the rarest thing that could ever happen to you is that a sponsor knocks on your door and says, I believe in this and I want to make it possible. But that's what our friends at Adobe did for us. The Adobe Experience Design team is really excited to sponsor this event because they want to make sure that designers of all walks of life have a seat at the table. They do that through their products, through their sponsorships, and through their culture. And what they're extending to us tonight is a vote for yes, a vote for this, and the possibility to bring us all together. Our friend at Adobe left us with a quote that says, "Humans always have been emotional and have always reacted to the artifacts in their world emotionally. We want designers to boldly pursue these reactions in order to bring about the change that we all desire in the world." I think many of us here know the good Gandhi quote, "Build the world you want to be a part of," or build the change that you want to see in the world. And I think we all have something to do with that here tonight. So thanks to Adobe, and thanks for all of you.
Hello, everyone. So unlike Pablo, I did not have that much confidence in the confidence monitor, so I brought an iPad. So thank you for having me. Thank you, Vectors, for bringing this together. My name is Rafa. I'm a design lead at IDEO.org. And I've been exploring how we can use design and technology to mitigate unconscious bias. And so today I'd like to walk you guys through some of the products and people who I think are really starting to make an impact in this space and paint a landscape of where some of the design opportunity areas lie. And so first, let's do an exercise, a little game, and this is going to require some participation from you all. So you're going to see 2 words pop up on screen, and I want you to tell me which you think is a larger cause of death each year in the United States. And so I'll prompt you to raise your hands and vote. And so the first one, tornadoes and thunderstorms. So raise your hand for tornadoes. No one. Oh, a few people. Okay. Thunderstorms. Okay. Suicide and homicide. Raise your hand for suicide. Raise your hand for homicide. Gotcha. Car accidents or abdominal cancer. Raise your hand for car accidents. Abdominal cancer. Great. So you guys ready for the answers? Can I get a drum roll or something? Yeah, awesome. So the actual answers are thunderstorms, suicide by like a factor of 2, and abdominal cancer. So raise your hand if you got one or more of these wrong. Yeah, a lot of folks. And so what everyone just experienced is what we call the availability bias or the availability heuristic. And this is when instances of one event come to mind more easily than others, and we mistakenly take that as evidence of their frequency. And so the important thing to note here is that greater ease of availability to the mind doesn't equal greater frequency of occurrence in the world. And the availability heuristic is just one of many types of biases or mental shortcuts that we all have. And these kinds of mistakes happen incredibly frequently and probably every single day for most of us. This also happens to be the foundation of stereotypes. And so we don't just hold bias towards events, we use it to make judgments about people. And if you were to look at any 2 strangers, and you can answer these next couple questions in your head, and ask yourself, which one of these people likes skiing? Which one has a GED, and which one has a PhD? Which one has been to Paris multiple times? Which one will I hire because they'll be more competent on the job? And so these 2 strangers happen to be my parents. Neither one of them likes skiing. Neither one of them has either one of those degrees. But they're both pretty amazing people. But the thing I want to underscore here is that our judgments of others are often incredibly inaccurate. But it turns out to be surprisingly easy to make these judgments based on nothing more than a static picture. And when we're working with such little information about people, we rely on the social group that person belongs to or other characteristics they embody as the basis for our judgments. And every day in decisions that may take fractions of seconds in our minds, we fail to perceive individuals as individuals, but rather view them as representatives of social groups. And these biases are not just restricted to race or ethnicity. They stem from a number of identities, including age, gender, class, sexual orientation, physical ability or disability, physical attractiveness, and on and on and on. And these biases we carry have very real impacts on the lived experiences of people who embody these identities. It's often the difference between landing a job offer or a company deciding you're just not a cultural fit, between having a bank loan approved or rejected, between going about your day or being stopped and searched. And so how might we transcend the negative effects of bias? And specifically, how and where can tech play a role? And so I'd love to show you an incomplete list of some opportunity areas that I've been seeing. And so opportunity 1 is to mitigate bias in decision making. And so mid-century in the US, the top 5 orchestras in the country were about 5% women. In the early 50s, some administrators of the Boston Symphony recognized this and had the awareness to know that this likely had little to do with actual talent, but rather some bias that's in the system. And so they started experimenting, and one of those early experiments is what's now referred to as blind auditions, where you place a curtain in between the judges and the performers, because you don't really need to see the person to know how well they play an instrument. And the first few trials flopped. The judges could still tell the gender of the person based on the sound their shoes would make as they enter the room. And so the early iterations, they removed all names, so everyone gets a number. Everyone takes their shoes off before entering the room, or there's a carpet on the floor. And there's a curtain between the judges and the performer. And so this simple intervention increased the likelihood of a woman advancing to final auditions by 50%. In a few decades, many of the top orchestras went from 5% to between 25 and 35% women, and today some even sit at around 50. And so in this case, the deep-seated belief that male equals virtuoso undermined the ability of orchestras to select top talent. And the arts isn't the only place where this exists. There's been several studies that have sent out identical resumes to companies that showed female names and African-American sounding names are often perceived as less competent and less hireable than the identical resumes of white and male sounding names. And so similar to what the Boston Symphony did for musical auditions, there's a few startups that are doing this for recruitment and hiring in the corporate world. And so Blendor is a hiring technology that reduces unconscious bias by hiding information that often leads to bias in hiring decisions, like a person's name, their picture, or alma mater, and elevates more sound criteria for making assessments about competence, like skills and job experience. And similar to the Symphony's blind auditions, Blendor's product aims to neutralize human error in the hiring process. Another place that bias shows up in decision making is in the sharing economy, something that many of us interface with every day. And a little over a year ago, a hashtag popped up on Twitter when a number of black users noticed that they were not being accepted by hosts on Airbnb. And I have a few of these hashtag Airbnb while black examples that I'll let you read through. And for these folks, their suspicions were confirmed by a Harvard study which found that African-American sounding names were roughly 16% less likely to be accepted than their white sounding counterparts. And this dynamic is not unique to Airbnb. Studies have found similar results in a number of sharing economy platforms. And so what to do about this? A couple years ago, an independent team of engineers built a plugin for Google Chrome called De-Bias Yourself that strips away pictures and names so that hosts can focus on content of messages, ratings, and endorsements. And this gives hosts who are aware that they have biases the option to conceal information from themselves that might otherwise be used for discrimination. So on the left, you see a normal screen from Airbnb, on the right with the plugin installed. They even have this badge that you can add to your profile to let others know that you're an equal opportunity host. And I know that some of the graphic designers are cringing in their seats right now. But I want to say that I know this isn't the best visual design execution or maybe even the best long-term solution for a platform like Airbnb, but I think this is such a powerful provocation. One, it normalizes the idea that people can and should take responsibility for their own bias. And two, it shows that a team of people who don't even work for a platform like Airbnb can challenge the system. And I also want to give a major shout out to all the folks at Airbnb that are doing some major efforts internally to combat bias on their platform. And so the second opportunity area is using data to name and address bias. So a study from Hewlett-Packard, wrong one. Okay. A study from Hewlett-Packard found that men apply to job descriptions when they meet only 60% of their criteria, but many women apply only if they meet 100%. And the words we choose to use has a major influence on who deems themselves qualified or not. So Textio is essentially a spell check for gender bias. You paste in the text of a job posting, and Textio highlights problematic phrasings and makes suggestions to help attract more qualified and gender diverse candidates. And as you see in the slide, the system is recommending to replace the word ambitious with visionary, high-reaching, daring, or bold. And it does this by comparing your job description to more than 70 million others that have been tracked on how they performed and what demographics they attracted. And on average, hiring teams with a high Textio score, the number you see in the top right, recruit top left, recruit 25% more people that are qualified enough to take an interview and attract 23% more women. And I think this is just the beginning of how machine learning can be applied to removing bias from our workplaces. And so something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last year is how to give companies the ability to not just understand bias in the recruiting and hiring, but also within their existing workforce. And so this is a product that I've been building outside of work that will collect data from a number of sources and help pinpoint specifically where bias shows up in an organization. And so at the most basic level, the tool can help provide visibility into the representation of certain identities. For example, we could determine that a team or a department or an office is X% this identity or X% that identity. But the tool allows companies to drill down even further. For example, we could see that within this specific department, it takes women 15% longer than men to get promoted to senior management. And we can also benchmark that to an industry average or another comparison point. And this insight around the difference in promotion pace could be an indicator that there's a bias in how that department is doing evaluations and promotions. And in this case, the system will recommend proven methods of debiasing employee performance reviews. And so what we're building is an analytics tool to help companies understand how bias shows up in their pay gaps, their promotions, employee turnover, and overall demographic representation. And so where this product focuses on helping organizations take responsibility for identifying bias, I've also been super interested in a product released earlier this year from the design firm Doberman that is all about individual accountability. And this app called Gender EQ uses voice recognition to track male and female voices in meetings and visualizes the gender and visualizes which gender is speaking the most. And as you might guess, it's been dubbed the mansplaining app. And while this isn't a silver bullet for solving gender disparity in the workplace, it is a great example of how technology can heighten awareness of how bias exists in our everyday interactions. And as much as I love this and think this is also a very powerful provocation, this is also an example of how even tools we create for combating bias can sometimes be filled with bias themselves. And so the underlying voice recognition technology of a product like this, which picks up on the pitch of your voice, may not be inclusive for all trans or gender nonconforming folks in categorizing people into the appropriate gender. And this is just something for us to keep in mind as we continue to build products in this space. And so the third opportunity area is for disrupting harmful narratives. So these mugshots on the left is what we see when we Google black teenagers versus the pleasant stock images of happy smiling kids when we Google white teenagers. And to be clear, I'm not blaming Google for this. For me, this raises a troubling question of how racial bias is reflected in the media more than it does Google's algorithms that display top hits for those articles or image sources. But regardless of where they stem from, these are the false narratives and stories that we're constantly bombarded with. And if you remember the availability bias, where what we see is a myopic, or what we see is stories that come to mind more easily, and this is how that bias forms. When what we're presented with is a myopic and often false representation of these different social groups. And so the Techies Project, who's here tonight, many of you guys saw them on the way in, is a great example of how we can disrupt harmful narratives. And they're doing this by documenting the excellence of underrepresented people in tech. And as they describe it, bring a bit of attention to folks in the industry whose stories have never been heard, considered, or celebrated. Another platform, the filters allow you to search, for example, developers who are people of color and women, and you see people who embody the intersection of these identities. And you can also then read about the individuals who are making some real impact in the tech world. And so in addition to telling stories of successes and stories of individuals, I think we also need to be much better at understanding systemic challenges that many communities face. So does anyone know what kind of map this is? You can just yell it out. Redlining. So this is a map of Chicago in 1940 that shows racial breakdown of certain neighborhoods and the red areas being populated predominantly by people of color. And so redlining was a standard practice of banks across America of denying investments based on racial demographics of communities, making it impossible or next to impossible for people of color to get home loans or business loans. And so in order to help illustrate the impact of some of these policies, Ta-Nehisi Coates created this data visualization in an article of his a few years back. And so the navigation at the top of this map walks you through 3 map states based on race, vacancy, and unemployment. So this one is based on race. The darker red the area, the more black and brown people live there. The darker blue, the more white folks who live there. And I'm going to walk you through the different map states so you can see the correlations. So this one is based on race. This one shows abandoned or vacant houses and lots. Notice the correlation. And this one shows unemployment by neighborhood in Chicago. The darker red areas have unemployment rates upwards of 27%. And underneath the menu, you can adjust for any of the past 7 decades to see the correlations across time. And so today, when we hear about unemployment or poverty in our inner cities, we hear a lot of victim blaming. We hear a lot of pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of talk. But when we're able to take a deeper look at how we got here and understand how the systems enacted decades ago very materially affect employment rates and housing prospects of people in cities across America today, I think we'll have a much better conversation about how to move forward. And this is just one place where I think design can play a huge role in taking invisible forces and making them visible. And so the last opportunity I have for today is to enable empathy among groups who otherwise may not understand the other's point of view. So this is an installation at the Whitney Museum in New York City last summer, and it was part of a larger installation that included commentary on mass surveillance, the war on terror, and the US drone program. And in this room, you can lay down and hear what it sounds like and what it feels like to have drones flying over you, the buzzing sound, the uncertainty of an airstrike, like many people in Pakistan, Afghanistan, or a number of other places do. And while you lay in the experience, a surveillance camera projects your image into another room, and you then become part of the exhibit for other museum goers. And when we talk about empathy, I think we have to talk about the potential of VR. Has anyone here done the Clouds over Sidra VR experience? A few folks. Clouds over Sidra is a virtual reality film produced by UNICEF, and in the experience you meet Sidra, a 12-year-old Syrian girl that walks you through a day in her life at a refugee camp and tells you about her experience as a Syrian refugee escaping war. It's an incredibly moving piece that virtually puts you in her shoes. And here's a room full of diplomats and global leaders who are walking with Sidra, including on the right, former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And this is Davos in 2015. And what you might notice is that this is a group of mostly middle-aged men for whom it might be difficult to imagine what it's like to be a teenage girl, let alone one who lives in a refugee camp. And what if every policymaker had to walk a mile in the shoes of people that their policy decisions would ultimately affect? What if every school kid could experience and build empathy with people who embody other identities before these biases and early conditionings harden in their minds? And so what can we all do? I believe that everyone in this room has the responsibility and the ability to start to move us on a more equitable track. And as you go about changing the current state, there are a few things that I've been thinking about that I want to leave you with. The first one is that small things count. And I just shared a lot of really bold opportunities to mitigate bias, but you can start to move the needle by taking ownership of everyday actions. And so we should all be asking ourselves small things. Like, who from the office are we going to lunch with regularly? Who are we providing mentorship to, and who are we seeking mentorship from? Who are we referring to jobs, and do they look and act just like us? And especially for this audience that came up a couple times in the panel, who are we testing our products with, and whose opinion is shaping the products that we bring into the world? The next point is that everybody is impacted by bias, but not in equal measure. And the thing is that there's certain communities that have suffered disproportionately at the hands of bias. And when we talk about addressing bias, we're often talking about increasing the diversity of very privileged spaces, about making tech companies more colorful, or getting more women into the C-suite. And these efforts are mission critical. But as we continue to push on these fronts, we also need to make sure that we're being inclusive of communities that have been most impacted by bias over the years. We need to be thinking about the millions of black and brown folks incarcerated due to a highly biased criminal justice system. We need to be thinking about how resources that lead to health are not equally distributed across our society. And to put this last point into perspective, life expectancy drops 10 years in the 4 subway stops between Murray Hill near Midtown Manhattan and Harlem. And so another perspective that I think sometimes gets left out of the conversation about bias when we're talking about diversity and inclusion is that bias and diversity are economic issues. So this graph from Pew Research shows the median net worth per household in the US from 1984 to 2011. And as you see, white households have 12 times the net worth of Black and Latinx households. And so now when we see diversity reports showing that our tech companies are, for example, 2% Black or 3% Latinx, let's remember that by not taking intentional steps to mitigate the unconscious bias in our workplaces, we're choosing to perpetuate this economic trend. And the last point is that I think change starts with dialogue. And I really believe that everyone in this room can start making change by continuing to talk about these issues and elevate their importance in our organizations, in our friendships, and in our conversations. And so thank you so much. I'm around after this if anyone wants to talk.
Hello, can you hear me? Good. Hi, I'm Jody. I'm a producer on the design team here at Stripe. In case anyone's unfamiliar, Stripe builds tools and infrastructure for starting, running, and growing a business online. I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the tools and infrastructure that we use on the design team within a rapidly growing company like Stripe. So our team's fairly similar to most in-house design teams in that our ultimate goal is to create beautiful work that does the right things for the right people, is fun, interesting, and efficient to use. So we work on a variety of type of things to accomplish this goal, from our web and mobile products to our marketing site, our brand, voice, videos, and even printed publications. So this one might look familiar if you looked inside your swag bags tonight. But we're fairly atypical in a few ways. One is the incredibly fast rate that Stripe is growing. So in the last year alone, the company has grown by about 300 people. And on the design team, we've grown from 6 to 15 in the last year. And we're expected to be around 35 by the end of next year. Another way we're a bit atypical is that Stripe is both an international and an incredibly cross-functional and collaborative company. So this map here is showing our 9+ offices worldwide and doesn't even account for the many Stripes that we have working remotely everywhere in between. So that combination means that we really need to employ a lot of strategies to maintain visibility into our work and to make sure that we're providing means for any Stripe anywhere to be able to contribute their opinions and expertise. So all of this is great and makes working at Stripe really exciting, but it does create some interesting challenges as we try to scale in a way that allows us to continue to produce good work, but also involves the diverse perspectives across the organization. So some questions we asked as we started to think about this. One, how do you scale up team capacity and increase diversity in skill sets and backgrounds? And then as we do grow and more work starts flowing through the team, how do we maintain that visibility into our work and incorporate the different perspectives to ensure that we're producing good and well-rounded work? And then how do we maintain the spirit of collaboration and knowledge sharing in a way that challenges and pushes our work forward? So because we knew the challenges that lay ahead of us, and because we know that we're not the only design team out there who's ever thought about any of this stuff, we kicked off the year with a little bit of a design team roadshow where we went around and just talked to other teams and to see how they kind of approach some of these issues. So I won't go into the nitty-gritty here, but this is just a high-level overview of some of the things we learned about other teams' operations. Of course, every team has its own unique set of challenges, but it was really fun to trade some tips and tricks and compare and contrast some things that have worked for other teams who are going through similar growing pains. So a few tools and tactics that we've been experimenting with. First, around growing the team. So it was really tempting to start recruiting as soon as we got headcount on the team. But our first step was really to identify the skill sets that we thought we needed. So at an end-of-year offsite we had back in December, we conducted a skill set survey where we asked ourselves, what kind of work do what kind of work and how much of it do we anticipate doing in the next year? Where do we think we're strong as a team, and where do we think we're lacking? This Post-it note, I think, is one of 4 giant sticky Post-it notes that we filled out. I know it's not the prettiest thing to look at, so I spared you the details of the other ones. But the result of the exercise is that we went from having 1 job rec of designer to 9 different job recs, including 2 new disciplines altogether, copywriting and research. So identifying this wider range of skill sets was really our first step in making sure that we're building out a well-rounded team. But we also want to make sure we're reaching outside of our own networks so that we aren't just hiring more of ourselves. So we had some fun hosting sourcing parties where we invited people from all over the company into one big room, and we brought snacks and drinks, and we scoured through our contact lists, and it's kind of a simple way just to make sure referrals are coming outside of the design team as well. We found that having a well-established framework was a really important tool in our hiring efforts. So we worked as a team to create a framework that defines the same set of questions that we ask every single candidate, as well as a rubric that we can use to evaluate answers against. This is really helpful in, 1, aligning on capabilities that we think are important in every candidate. 2, more importantly, mitigating against some unconscious biases that can sometimes creep their way into the interviewing process. So next, some tools that we use to maintain visibility into our work and allowing spaces for open collaboration. So this is our wall. This is where every designer prints out work in progress and pins it. It might seem like a simple practice, but we found it to be an indispensable part of the way that we open up feedback and inclusion to the larger company. It creates a casual setting for anyone to chat about work in progress, for anyone who may be less vocal or maybe isn't directly involved on a specific project. It's also a nice way to showcase our involvement in the company and a diverse amount of work that we work on, and it's kind of a subtle way of encouraging design team collaboration in the future. So one really important thing to note here is that in order to make this work, we realized we need to make it super clear that the intent of the wall is not to be a museum of pristine work that with perfect masonry layout. Its intent is instead highly functional. And so there's a general understanding that work here is in progress and open for discussion and is constantly rotating. And as I mentioned, we're also a very international company, so not everyone is walking by our wall every day. So we also use Wake, which is essentially a digital version of our wall with the same guidelines. And then we also pipe everything that goes into Wake into Slack, which is where most of the company is. We also consider our physical space to be a tool. So this is our design pod. We use the work table that you see here and the TV in the background for impromptu meetings or reviews. It's just another way of inviting all stripes into our creative workspace. So lastly, a few things we've done to make sure that we're challenging and pushing our work forward. So the growing team and increased amount of work we take on has created the need to bring a little bit more structure into the way we review and learn from each other. So we've had weekly hour-long design reviews for a while, since the team was probably 5 or 6, where we go around the room and designers share work in progress and we get feedback. It's always been a nice way of bringing the entire team together and for general awareness of what everyone's working on. But as the room's grown bigger, we found it harder to get through everything and to make sure that everyone's voice was heard and that people felt comfortable sharing their opinion. So we've also started baking critiques into our process, which I'm sure you're familiar, are more focused reviews with a smaller room. We also make sure that the room has a diverse group of designers in it. So for example, someone who maybe typically works on brand or our videos will be in a product design critique where we're looking at the nitty-gritty UX of a new settings feature in our dashboard product. So we found these really important in helping us, one, make sure that we're getting people with different perspectives thinking about the same problems we're trying to solve, and two, that we're being rigorous and intentional in our design decisions by dedicating focus time to each design. There we go. Oh, I went too far. So you guys didn't see that. So the last thing we've gotten in the habit of doing is having these mini workshops hosted by different members of the team. It's a nice way to learn from each other, and sometimes about things that aren't directly tied to our everyday work at Stripe. So here's Ben. He's teaching us about CSS grids. Here's the rest of us trying to understand Ben teaching us about CSS grids. Just kidding, we totally got it. Here's Everett teaching us the mechanics of screen printing. So yeah, those are just a fun way to highlight some unique skill sets and backgrounds on the team. So that's it. That's just a quick summary of some of the tools that we've been using on the team to combat some of these scaling issues. We love talking about this stuff. So any ideas, questions, or feedback, I'm Jody at Stripe, and I'd love to chat. Thanks. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. All right. So, many of you are probably wondering who the hell I am. I am Maurice Woods. I am the Executive Director of Interact Project. Does anybody know what Interact Project is? Thank you. Appreciate that. So I just want to say a few words. First and foremost, thank We Are Vectors and everybody involved for making this event happen. This is truly very special because the work that we do is really sort of, in a lot of ways, respective of all the things that you've talked about tonight. For those of you who don't know what Interact Project is, our mission basically is that we bring design to underserved communities and kids of color. And the reason why we do this is, quite frankly, because we see the need not only for teaching kids in underserved communities and giving them access to design, but also providing, people of color opportunities to get in the business. I myself have sort of taken a pretty long standing on this position. I've been doing this now for 13 years. And man, it's been a tiring, long run, to say the least. But the reason why I do it and the reason why I continue to work and continue to develop Interact Project and keep trying to go on stronger and keep trying to have more impact is because I see the power of impacting kids' lives. I was that kid, I was that inner city kid, and basketball was really my first way out, and that's how I got exposed to design. So I know, in fact, that there's other kids out there that are really interested in design and want to have these opportunities. So I try to do that with our program. One of the things I do want to say in light of the event is that it's really important for diversity in design. And the reason why it's really important is that, visual culture permeates our civilization every day. We see things and we aspire to be those things, or we associate truths with the things that we see. And it's not just, graphics, but it's also image and the way people are portrayed and how they're portrayed. And it's very important to have those diverse people in the room so they can mitigate and work on those images to make sure that representation is right. Because not only does it affect the way people see things, but it also affects the people that are marginalized, the way they think about themselves. So it's really important, the work that we're trying to do is we're trying to, bring about this change in the community where the things that we're teaching them about design is much bigger than just teaching them about design, but teaching them to be thinkers and next generation of innovative thinkers. So I'll conclude and just say, I want to give everybody, when we give a special hand clap to everybody who came out and supported this event. It's a real testament to all the work that we've done, all the hard work we've done over the course of the years, and all the things that we've done to try to sort of provide as many opportunities for young people as we possibly can. So I want to thank you all so much for that.
Do you guys have a good time? Woo! So I want to give one last shout out to each of the names here on the board. We wouldn't be here without Stripe giving us their beautiful office and their amazing team to work with. Google for filming this and helping us spread the word to everyone who couldn't be in the room with us. To Facebook Design for helping us amplify our impact here and making it possible by paying our bills for us. Quora, AIGA, inVision, Figma. I want to address Adobe, Sketch, Udacity, Bluerun Ventures, Rvision Path, and Spectrum. They all voted on this being an important topic, and they put their money behind their beliefs, and they made this possible for us. So with that, I'll pass it to Gabe for some closing comments, but thank you for being here, and thank you for those who made it possible.
All right, we did it. That's it. We did it. Awesome. I think the spirit of this conference is really to just talk about this topic, and we know it's a little bit uncomfortable and it gets people kind of like their hairs up. But the worst thing we could do is censor ourselves and not address it. So this is our attempt to just put the spotlight on it, address it head on, and start the conversation. So if you can please continue that conversation amongst ourselves, reach out to us, reach out to other people that you think might benefit from this conversation. That is the whole point of why we're here. So thank you so much for being a part of it. We're beyond stoked that it was such an awesome event.
Lastly, thanks to you guys. One last thing I do want to just kind of send on. It does take conscious thought. It does take deliberate action. Just wishing it and willing it to happen isn't enough. So as something that came through a lot of the talks is something that I just kind of wish to remind you. Tomorrow, little things, big things, medium things, whatever, do something about it. It doesn't just come to you. I also, just in terms of, I do want to thank my students at San Jose State. A lot of you are in here. A lot of you have used. I asked you to help. Education is a big part of it. So I'm privileged to have the opportunity to teach, to work with you, and to be able to impact that pipeline at the very beginning. So I want to thank you all for just all your work. You guys are all scattered around. So anyway, thanks to you and thanks to everybody.
See us next time.